Welcome to Industry Tools and Best Practices. Backed by popular demand, this group presented back at the CBG conference a couple months ago, and glad to be here. It's a great opportunity for us to, I think more than anything, we're gonna let our panelists go through a number of different topics and talk about what it takes to be successful. A lot of it's centered around communication, and from there, hopefully we got some time and you guys can ask any questions that you might have and let us know what any concerns that you have or anything that you're seeing in the, whether it's in the field or in the business community that's of concern to you. Welcome, Jeff.
Yeah, sorry, I had the wrong room.
I'm Matt Grove. I'm the Director of Engineering and Construction at the Wisconsin Transportation Builders Association. Like I said, it's great to be here. Along with me are a couple of our great members. And what I'm gonna do is let these guys self-introduce themselves. Like I said, we've done this panel before, and I think they'll hopefully be well prepared and ready to answer some questions. Jeff.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Parisi, formerly of Parisi Construction. Now I'm the Director of Business Development for the Walbeck Group, which means I get to work with all the companies, Panadol, Zenith Tech, and Northeast Asphalt as well.
Hello, Neil Bakke, President of Matthey Construction Company.
Hi, I'm Eric Bertram. I'm General Manager of Underground Utilities at Edgerton Contractors.
Okay, first question is going to go to Eric. One thing we hear a lot about, and we're questioned often from DBEs as well as non-DBEs, is regarding bids, bid submittals. What's the proper, understanding schedules? What can you do in that communication related to that when you're quoting a project to a prime contractor? So Eric, take that one away.
Yeah, thank you. So it's important to know your own work, and what I mean by that is, as a professional, as a business owner, or a high-level person at your company, you know your work better than anyone else will. So what that means is, as you look at projects or upcoming DOT solicitations, you know your lead times, how long your work's going to take. As GCs or primes, we have a rough idea where this will fit in a schedule, but it's important that there's engagement from both your end and our end so that we can better communicate where you're going to be. It's going to be a spring, if multiple mobilizations, things of that nature. And then if on your end, if you have specific scheduling concerns, long lead items, there's an opportunity in that bidding process in order to get those questions asked. And if there's something that doesn't fit with the design schedule as laid out by the DOT or otherwise, you can either get those questions in ahead of time, or there's a communication, so you're taking some of that risk out of your bid and kind of laying it out, or a foundation to understand how that work's actually going to fit into the project. And it's also important to engage with your suppliers and vendors earlier in the process. So I'm sure many of you have done this before, but the later you get in the process with questions or some deeper discussions, the harder it is to get answers, or the answers you need in order to make an effective and competitive bid. So the sooner you do the engagement, the sooner you look at it, the more prepared you are, the more competitive, the more engagement, and the better you'll feel from a risk standpoint when you submit a proposal, both either as a prime or as a subcontractor. And when you do this, if there are still concerns with procurement or scheduling, clearly articulate those on your proposal. So, make it, whether it's a phone call, in the email, or on your proposal, or all three, clearly show, the more engagement you have and the more clear you show this information, the more responsive a prime will be and feel comfortable that you have a good handle on the job, and your risk essentially has become a prime contractor or a general contractor's risk as well. And then the other thing is also important is understanding kind of the hierarchy of the documents when you're looking at DOT. So 105.4.3, you have your addendum, then your SPVs, plans, additional special provisions, and standard specs. So I'm sure we all open plans and 3 different documents say 3 different things. So it's always important to understand what you're going to be held to for which standard. So if you're looking in the DOT, standard specs is right there in 105.4.3. Follow that order, because that's going to be the rule of the land when it comes time to, if you're lucky enough to get awarded the project. That's the expectation you're going to have going forward, is that in that order of what they're looking for.
Thanks, Neil. At any point, if any of our contractors that are in the room want to add some comments, I think that'd be a great thing to do, and just raise your hand and let me know. Next question is for our seasoned veteran, Jeff Parisi. Jeff said, it's interesting because Jeff's been a great longtime active member of WTBA, and because of that, I think you've seen a lot of, you've had a lot of communication and a lot of discussions about what we're talking about today. But not only that, the owner of a company that was small to medium size, I would call it, right? And now working with a very large corporation. So Jeff's got a lot of knowledge in this area. So I'm not gonna outline this one for you, Jeff. I'm just gonna kind of turn it over to you. Give your thoughts on what you think make for a successful company.
Thank you, Matt. I think that was kind of a not so subtle way to say that I'm old, right? And so all of a sudden I'm the oldest guy in the room. It didn't seem like it was that much long ago that I was a younger guy in the room, but times change. So I kind of want to piggyback off of Aaron's speech at lunch today. I thought he did an outstanding job, first of all, but he talked about saving, and he talked about $200 a month at Starbucks can turn into this over a 20 or 30-year period, and that same philosophy can work for your company. We were a small business, and I'll be honest, like previous generations didn't really focus on building the company. It was a lot of, Aaron kind of outlined that you go to zero every year. You make a few bucks and you want to buy a car or do something to the house, you take the money and you do it. And what that means is that small businesses tend to kind of use their companies as their own personal checkbook. And I would tell you that you've got to treat that company like it's its own person, and think about what Aaron said in terms of the little things and the savings and the long-term building of wealth that you can do. I didn't take a dime out of the company for 20 years, right? And just left it in and left the balance sheet continue to grow. And Aaron talked about how, as you continue to earn money, you invest and you get other opportunities. Well, it's the same thing with your company. As you grow your balance sheet, you can do more work. You get a better bonding rating, you better insurance rates. And each time you get a better bonding rating, each time you get a lower insurance rate, you're lowering your cost of doing business. That then allows you to be more profitable going forward. So, it's key to think about that business as its own person and apply those same fiscal disciplines to your company as you would your own checkbook, and let that thing grow and let it become its own thing. And part of that is also understanding your numbers, right? It's how do you know if you're going to make money? The questions that you're all asking yourselves as small business are the same questions I asked myself 30 years ago, 20 years ago. How do I know if I'm going to make any money? How do I know what my bid rates should be? And I would just encourage you to get answers to those questions, because they're out there. And as you find the answers to those questions, and I think kind of the whole point of this conference is that there's a whole bunch of people here that are willing to help you find those answers. And we've all gotten help. None of us started with a book of knowledge that was like from day one it was go. We've all had to learn the hard way over time, and got a lot of help along the way. And now it's time to give back, right? It's a lot of fun working with small businesses. It's a lot of fun working with people, and it's great to try to help pass on what we've learned, right? And right, wrong, or indifferent. You can apply it or don't apply it, but so I think this is what the spirit of this event is all about.
Thanks, Jeff. Next question is for Neil, and it's regarding supply lead times. For a while now, we've had numerous discussions, whether it's with DOT or with our contractors or with suppliers for that matter, on what are we going to do about our concerns about getting supplies to our projects in time, and the relationship with that relative to the tight timeframes that we have on projects. So I'll turn it over to Neil to give a few comments here about how to handle that and how to communicate that, I guess, during the bidding process.
Yeah, I think material supply lead time, it's a real big deal. It can be simply, stated it's all communication, and then I could just pass the microphone back. But it's really nothing more than keeping people informed, right? So at the bid time, if you are talking to a supplier and they're like, hey, this is 6 months out, you need to let the primes know, hey, there's going to be a delay. And then as you're getting a subcontract, remind them again, hey, there's a delay in the receiving these materials. Go to the pre-con, there's a delay. Go to the weekly meetings, there's a delay. You need to keep having that conversation. Don't think that the quantity or the material you're talking about or the type is insignificant, because it's your responsibility when your work comes into play to perform. And if you can't get a material, even a small piece, your job can't be done. You're going to be put on the spot, possibly liquidated damages if the project doesn't get complete. So I guess as soon as you can get that, earlier the better. Clarifying your bid. Talked about that a little bit. I will say DBEs are not as good as non-DBEs on clarifying their bid. Put the stuff down. Don't feel like it's going to hurt you in getting the work, because the prime just wants to know what's going on, wants to know what the issues are, and they make them take the risk, right? Don't take the risk yourself. Weekly meetings, I know they're a pain, right? How do I get to all of them? Sometimes you can just call in. Sometimes now they're even doing them on Teams or Zoom. But if you can't get there, you need to follow up. But becoming or being part of weekly meetings is important, especially in your 2 to 3 weeks out of your work being done. You get to feel where the schedule is. You can have more discussions about concerns and issues, and you can work through those things. Not showing up, not going to a weekly meeting, not hitting your target schedule puts you, the person with the target. There is a process in the CMM, Section 108.10.2, allows for delays, but you have to follow the process. And if you don't follow the process, the engineer's like, yeah, I feel bad, but we have this process in place. You need to follow it. And it's a good learning part, but hopefully you don't get there. But communicate. From minute you start looking at the plan, when you put your quote out there, when you get a subcontract, when you go to the pre-con, when you go to the weeklies, just communicate.
That's a really good point that Neil just made regarding communicating, and it's not just with the primes. If you do experience a delay in delivery of unexpected delay in delivery of materials, you have to let people know that immediately at WISDOT through the project manager. Not giving notification right away will put you in a significantly worse position with them than, if you wait till LDs are assessed, for example. There will most likely be a lot of discussion about why didn't you give notification, and when you put your order in, and all sorts of different discussions. So that communication has to happen immediately upon knowing this. And I know that's easier said than done because there's a lot going on projects, but I've seen it a number of times yet, and it's just not. It's a compromised position that you put yourself in by not addressing that situation right away. Same goes for at the time of bid. If you know you have a problem, call your primes or call the association for that matter. Sometimes we can do things about this prior to bid. We can maybe issue addenda or whatever to address the situation. Not every time, but it's certainly worth bringing that up ahead of time rather than waiting until you're in a jam. It's just it typically does not work out in the favor of somebody that doesn't have control of that risk. So very important situation. Next one for Eric is communicating with prime contractors regarding schedule and availability during the project. What is your preferred means of communication and how often?
Yeah, and I have some stuff that I even scratched off because I think Neil said it better than I could. But communication is key in this, and actually just follow up on Matt's point, and I guess close out my initial point on the bidding phase is through the Q&A process that the DOT presents. There sometimes it might be frustrating. You look at the answer and say, well, that doesn't answer it. But there's times where I know I've been on a mega project where we built an entire schedule and we could not make a certain bridge date open work. We brought it up to them, said, here's the path. They extended it by 90 days and it became buildable. So it is possible. Know your work. If you own it and you talk about it, that engagement is powerful because the DOT will admit they need contractors to tell them, there's a lot of workshops before projects even go out, that an opportunity to talk and present. You have to be active. You have to be your own advocate in order to help yourself out. And I'd also argue that, none of us up here build a job by ourselves. It takes subs, vendors, we all build it together. So if one part of the leg falls off here, we're all stumbling. So it's important to communicate. And so I guess as a segue into effective communication is everyone and probably all your key people have phones. And I wrote this down and I put in all capital is document, document, document. And I have a saying with any of our people, and I'm sure Neil and Jeff say the same thing, is if it's not in writing, it never happened. And there's going to be conversations you're going to have with inspectors, engineers, DOT personnel, whoever might be on the field, your supervisor might have that conversation. Take the time, whether it's at that moment, write in a journal, follow it up with an email, put it in writing. It will save you, I promise you. It's cheap to take pictures. It's cheap to take notes. Cloud storage for your data is cheap. Doing work and not getting paid for it is expensive, and it's going to hit you twice. You're not getting paid for it, and you spent the money. So I can't stress that enough. If you take anything out of what I say today, document and take pictures. I always tell my supervisors, if you're not taking at least 10 pictures a day, you're doing us injustice. I mean, I prefer not to be a picture of a nice sunny sky. Well, maybe some days, but it's vital because it will save you at some point. And notes, help yourself out. The number of times I've looked back to audit quantities for our guys and our girls, and we talk about, well, do we install this quantity? We had this pipe runs. Well, a simple note with structures we did or pipe runs. It's easy to go back and we make mistakes. Sometimes the DOT makes mistakes, but we have that information written down. It's not hunting through a bunch of information. It's readily readily identifiable, and it'll save you. Get paid for what you do. It's one of the best things you can do for yourself. And then I guess the last thing I'll hit on with communication is, like I said, if it happens, write it down. Communicate as much as possible. There's no such thing as overly communicating. Email and data is cheap, like I said. But then when it's all possible for your crews and your people, set up a process. Make it standard process for all your crews so that if you have Foreman A on a job one time and Foreman B comes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a year later, they know what your process is as a company and they can follow it. This way you're always evaluating the process, not the person. So, we have a new talent pool coming up, right? There's a lot of younger supervisors rising to a certain rank. They're going to be picking up a lot of habits and instructions from older supervisors. It's important that you have a standard that you can teach, and you can teach across to all your employees so that they know what to expect. So if you're writing something down, everyone's putting it in the same spot. If you're taking pictures or writing notes, have it written down, have a standard, and that process will help you make it a lot easier to be scalable too as you grow.
Okay, Jeff, what about communicating with employees such as superintendents, having a system of notifying you as an owner or as a leader within your company when something might not go well in the field? How do you tell staff to be careful about acting properly around clients? I guess that sort of concept is something that I've seen for years, dealing with all the disputes within the industry, and I think it's just really important to make sure. I think one thing that we've talked about is it's not uncommon for companies to do a lot of training in this sort of area at higher level management positions, but does it always trickle down to the field and to the individuals that are out in the field in front of the issues more than anyone? And how do you make sure that you keep your arms wrapped around those issues?
Yeah, that was a lot. So, the employees are the key, right? So, anybody that knows me would probably comment to say that can't build his way out of a wet paper sack, and they'd probably be right. So, what I can't do. I really know what I can't do, and I've had to hire people to do that over the years. And you have to have the right people on the job. So I've said to people that I've never fired anyone that I wanted to bring back. And what that tells me is I haven't done it enough, because that means I haven't made a mistake, right? And if I could go back, I would do that more quickly, because what happens is you get rid of the bad people, you keep the good people find more people. It's just like Aaron's compounding financial success. Your people compound, right? And good people breed better people. And so the things that you asked me about, Eric has said great things about the process, right, and how you document. And then you put a good person in that position who is pulling on the rope the same direction and who's committed to the company and doing the right things, and you've got a great system. So it's really a cooperation. It's getting the right people. It's setting a good process for them to have the tools to be able to communicate. And then it's just behaving professionally. The story I tell is that we do a lot of work in Madison for Veridian Homes, and Veridian Homes chooses who they pick to work for. And when the owner of Veridian is going to go out to dinner with his wife and he swings by one of our projects or meets any of our people, and it doesn't matter if it's the truck driver, laborer, the superintendent, or it's me, that person has to represent the company and act professionally. And I want that owner, when they leave the site, to say, that's my contractor. I'm proud of that group that's out there. The equipment looks good, the people look professional, they behave professional. And you kind of referenced, Matt, training at whatever level. It's training at all levels. So that's a huge part of our training, our safety training and whatever, is how you behave on the job site and how you represent yourself and how you represent the company. And if anybody's not in line with that, it's got to go. I mean, it's just because that just becomes a bad thing throughout the entire company. So communicate clearly, communicate professionally. Treat them like you want them to treat your customers, and they will, right? So just be respectful, and it's a two-way street. You're trying to help them provide a life for their family and their kids, and improve their generational wealth, and we're all doing the same thing. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
Absolutely, thanks, Jeff. And I always talk about this from a big picture standpoint. I think everyone's well aware of the workforce issues that are out there, whether it's on the labor end of things or whether it's on the engineering side of things. And it's something that I've thought about a lot over the years, because I've worked both out in the field and worked for the industry. It's so vital that we create a culture out on these job sites that we can attract and retain employees in a different type of employee that we used to have in the past. I think this is really critical. People don't like to talk about it a lot, but building on what Jeff's saying, the professionalism and the treating people fairly and kindly, I think, is a lot more important than it used to be.
Yeah, it's creating a culture, and our first thing is to keep our own, right? It's hard to find new people, so you want to minimize the need to find new people. So, the people are coming from a lot of different angles and a lot of different areas, and you want them to come to work and feel like they're in a safe space. You want them showing up to work knowing they're going to be treated well, knowing they're going to be respected, and then they go home and they're sitting at the bar with their friends on Friday night, and they're talking about how they get treated at work and how great it is, and that word spreads, and that makes for a great company.
Thanks, Jeff. Neil, how about accounts receivable and communication with project staff? And primes about quantities, and how important is that, making sure that you have your arms around that?
Well, no money's made in accounts receivable. So the value of it is to not have accounts receivable, or at least understand what we can do to minimize it. And so understanding the spec book again, section 109.6 talks about progress payments. There's actually a paragraph that says DOT is going to make 2 progress payments each month as feasible if the contractor is due at least $1,000. How many times have you seen that happen? Probably not, but if you really push the issue, they're going to pay you because it's in their spec book, right? But just need to understand the rules. But how do we get there? Once the engineer makes the payment, the prime contractor's supposed to pay you by what's written in ASP 7 within 10 calendar days. You're like, okay, 10 days. I I can deal with 10 days. It's not 10 days. So we're going to talk about what that actually means in real time. Let's say you're in the early part of November, end of the season, you're like, yeah, I'm going to wrap this up, we're going to get paid, and then we're going to go on, vacation for a couple of months. We completed work on the 9th of November. The engineer puts a pay estimate in on the 10th. You can go out onto the payment system viewing and you can see, hey, there was a pay estimate. I'm going to get paid. On the 27th, the engineer, I forgot my note. The 10th, the day after you did your work, he did submit a pay estimate, but it didn't include your quantities. On the 27th, the engineer pays your quantities. On the 4th, December 4th, so now we've gone into another month already. This is real-time stuff. This actually happens. The engineer supervisor approves the payment. On the 6th, the prime receives the payment. On the 15th, 10 days later, 10 calendar days later, the prime's responsible to pay you. They send that out. It's not in your bank on the 15th. They need to cut the check, send it in the mail. So now by the 20th, we're right next to Christmas, you're going to get the check. That's 41 days, and that would be the best case scenario, right? Just think 40 days. Okay, so you are working, a lot of companies, nothing wrong with it. It's how we operate on a line of credit, right? And so if you were $50,000 line of credit at 7% interest for 41 days, that would cost you $393, right? So how do we minimize that? Because $393, you fortunate if you can count that in your bid, but if you can't, that's coming off the bottom line. That's profit out the door, right? So how do we stop those things, or how do we minimize that time frame, right? Verify the quantities with the engineer daily. It's your job, not theirs. But if you talk to them about it, then they'll take the information, they'll work with you. But if you're going to rely on them, the 40 days is going to be 70 days. It's when they get to it. Keep hounding them, right? Verify your quantities at the end of each stage of work. So daily, and then, hey, we worked for 2 weeks, we're going to be gone for a week. Verify them. Say, hey, for these last 2 weeks, we did 75 units. Make sure they understand that. Take them out in the field and show them if you have to. And then submit your material certifications and test reports, because they'll sometimes withhold payment if they don't have those things. So all of that is your responsibility, not the engineer's responsibility. So getting paid is part of your responsibility. If a contractor isn't responsible for themselves, nobody's going to look out for you. So just take that into consideration, and hopefully it works out and you get paid more in a timely manner.
Thanks, Neil. I get calls sometimes from contractors saying they haven't been paid in 3 to 4 months, believe it or not. And my first reaction to that is, how is that possible? How did you double, two-folded blame? One, how did it not get paid by the field personnel? But two, how did you not address that issue? I want to take this back, because it's something that has to be taken care of and elevated within whatever level it takes within the department.
I guess what I would say is that that individual never goes to weekly meetings. And if they go to weekly meetings, they're not talking at those weekly meetings, because that's the place to have that conversation, because the project engineer in the job trailer is the one making those pay estimates. And so, hey, I haven't been paid. There's supervisors usually there. There's supervisors there on phone. Having that conversation so it gets done. So
when you get in a delinquent payment situation like that, I've always told people, don't feel bad about elevating that situation to whatever level you can. I mean, people call me about it. I can help them out with that, but there's no reason to to have bad feelings about going over somebody's head in that situation, because it's just unacceptable, and it's not difficult to make those payments. It's just a matter of somebody not getting that work done. So, next question's for Eric. What are important considerations when communicating with WISDOT PMs, knowing project chain of command and the prime/sub relationship within DOT projects?
Yeah, I think I told Neil before this started, he had this conversation or kind of laid out that flow at the last time we did this. And I said it's powerful because you don't realize how much money costs, especially when you perform the work. And something I'd also, I guess, add on to is if you do have certain materials that you have to purchase ahead of time, there is the materials on hand payment mechanism in the provisions. I didn't write down the number, and I'm ashamed to not remember it, but it's important. What it basically says is you can submit an invoice, proof, and all your tests and your certs, and you can get paid for that material. So it could speed up some of that if you have to purchase certain material ahead of time or your vendors are requiring it, but you can use that to your advantage so you're not carrying that cost before that work's even a quantity. So something to look at as well. But more so to the question I was actually asked, my first response always is when someone says communications, what does your contract say? So the important thing to remember is unless you're priming the job yourself, your contract's going to be with the GC. So obviously with that, you have engineers, you have DOT staff. I always joke that the engineers sometimes on staff, they're not the engineer, they're not the inspector, they're an observer. So to Neil's point, you have to track your quantities. They're there to observe your work, but they're not going to advocate for your work. You're your own advocate. So when you're talking to a PM and they tell you, oh, well, just do this and make it work. Well, you have to know what the contract says. You have to know what the specs say and what your responsibility is. And of course, you're allowed to have a dialogue. But if there's an exchange or a discussion with cost, that has to go through a GC, because otherwise you're setting yourself up that you submit a price or something else and the GC didn't hear about it. Well, the the general contractor will need to have money to process it and everything else. So you're going to cut into potentially your own number. So it's important that there's an open dialogue. We talked about, ad nauseum about communication. So that communication is important, but include your GC in those conversations so they're not surprised by, a potential cost or an extra. And, I kind of made a note to make sure if you have something that's a differing site condition or you feel that something is extra work, know the 104.3.2, and that's the initial oral notification for a delay. Know it, study it, and make sure that you communicate with your GC or your prime if something that you feel is out of contract or out of what the original intent of the work is. You can't reverse time. No one can here. If you can, let me know, because I want to tap into that as well. Because once it's gone, it's gone. So you have to follow that process, because I've seen legitimate claims rejected because the process was not followed. And what I can't say enough, be your own advocate, because no one's going to do it for you. It's your money, you earned it, you bid the job, you know what the job's supposed to be, but you have to follow the rules that are established. So know your contract, know the DOT playbook, because that'll help you in the long run. And then, in case I don't get to talk again, document, document, document.
Thanks, Eric. Good point. And what I've seen is all contractors probably have a different level of understanding of construction law and the spec book and that sort of thing. So, I mean, my recommendation to younger contractors or smaller startup type contractors is lean on people. Talk to some primes. Say, hey, I've got this situation here. Have you seen this before? Is it something that's worth pursuing, for example, when they're in a loss type of situation? And I know everybody addresses that a little bit differently, but sometimes I think that's a little uneasy for some firms to really grasp that idea and move forward on situations. And sometimes you're not entitled to something that you clearly think that you are. So you just got to talk to the right people. Our last topic I think we have here today is a really important one, and that's safety. So I'm gonna start with Neil on some quick thoughts on safety and training and what you've seen over the years maybe, and how have things changed and what it means to your company, and then probably hand it over to you guys also to say something about that.
Yeah, I think safety is a timely topic as we're all getting ready to get started in the spring here. Oh, did we have winter? We'll get it eventually, but safety is honestly the most important aspect of your business. If it's not, you really need to consider what you're doing and why you're doing it. Do you really want people working for you that have to worry about not being able to go home in the same or better shape than they were when they showed up? But I think there's two parts people generally choose when they're thinking about safety for their company. Are they going to be good, or are they going to be lucky? And honestly, most contractors go with luck. Because going with good takes too much effort, and employees, they think employees are generally going to get hurt anyway. So let's just be lucky and see how it goes, right? Ownership, management, unwilling to change by emphasizing safety because safety gets in the way of production. So we need to be production orientated to make money, and we're not going to do anything to get in front of that. So that's the people that are lucky. To be good at safety, I think ownership, management need to be on board. There's no shortcuts ever. People are watching you all the time. Their heads are on a swivel, they see and they hear and they know what you're doing. So if you take a shortcut, if you're that person that tells them don't text and drive, and you get in your vehicle and the first thing you do is whip the phone out and start emailing and texting, they see that, right? Company needs to invest in training and PPE so their employees know that their job, when they do their job, they have it's safety in mind, they have the proper equipment and to do so. Choose to talk about safety every day. It's a choice, right? If you don't choose to talk about it, it's not going to happen. Safety doesn't happen by itself. It's a culture that's cultivated, and in my world, it's from the top down. Choose to be good at safety for the right reason, and that's your employees. It's not your bottom line, right? If you're doing it for the right reason, then it's going to be there every day, all day. But if you're only doing it to save money, you're just not going to see the results that's going to be required.
Yeah, well said. I'm quite honestly kind of irritated that we continue, like, at this day, having to talk about safety separately. When nobody talks about, hey, don't forget to include your bedding in your pipe price or your backfill, or it is just part of what you do. It should be part of what you do, and it should be incorporated in your work. You know, a lot of companies are multi-generational. A lot of employees are multi-generational, and you can be as careless as you want, kind of with your own life and putting yourself in a position. But when it comes to putting your kids in there, and if you've got a child coming to work for the company, that doesn't play, right? We got a different set of rules for the kids. So it should just be part of the organization. And then it also goes back to talking about keeping your own and your employees. You can't afford to have an employee get hurt because they're off. You know, not only are you a crew person down on your crew, which is difficult to make up for, but then that person gets pulled out of the culture. That person gets pulled out of their group and to try to recover from that injury. And that's as stressful mentally as it is physically. So bad for the company, it's bad for the individual. There's just nothing good that comes from injury, so you should do whatever you want. And it takes an effort. I'm going to be honest about this. I always thought we were pretty good at safety, and we emphasized it and we trained, but we really didn't have anyone out there, be honest with you, on the job every day looking at safety. And so when we sold to the Walbeck Group, of course, they put a full-time safety person. And I always told our people, I said, there's no budget for safety and technology. So you can spend whatever you want on safety and technology. And you'd be shocked at what they could put under those categories, by the way. But the first year, yeah, it's great. Yeah, you never knew baseball hats were a safety thing. But anyway, the first year we had a safety person out there, our ladders and our trench boxes were a mess. And when I get these pictures back of these things, they're like split in half. I go out to the foreman, I'm like, what are you doing? Well, you know, I could still get up and down. I'm like, dude, I told you, we talked about this every safety meeting. I told you, there's no budget. When it's broken, fix it. Well, you know, I just didn't get it. So even though we were well-intended, you have to do the backup. You have to be out on the job site, making sure it's happening and making sure the right things are being done on the job site, because you can't afford to lose people and you can't afford to have unsafe work.
No, that's a great point, both Neil and Jeff. And I think if I ask them, they tell me they have a similar iteration that we have at at Edgerton. It's called Safety, Quality, Efficiency, and I'm sure you've seen it around for every other company. There might be safety, quality, productivity, some mantra of that. And we had a speaker last week actually talk about this, and they showed a picture of a stool, and it was a three-legged stool, and it's safety, quality, efficiency, and or some iteration of that. And the point being is, if you don't have one part of the stool, you're going to fall over. And I think that's vital because, like Neil said, if you're not about safety, you're just lucky, and it will catch up eventually. And I firmly believe, as you plan your work and you look at a task and how you plan it, if you plan to do your job safely, and you know the specs you're trying to adhere to or what quality metrics you have to meet, the efficiency and the money comes with it. Because if someone's worried that they're going to lose their life, a finger, an arm, doing the task, there's no way they're going to be efficient or do a quality job. You can't convince me of it any other way. So it's important for us as a company, I guarantee Jeff and Neil would feel the same way, is you have to plan it in that order. Because if you can't think you're doing your job safely, you're going to set up to fail at your other two levels. It's a three-legged stool, and you can't substitute one for the other. And I know for us, we even talked internally about changing it to SSQE to emphasize how much the safety actually meant to us. And or we just wanted the four-legged stool, I'm not sure, but the thought process remains the same.
Thanks, guys. One more question. Relationship building is something I get asked a lot. I think a big part of the reason why people come to conferences and conventions and things like that are to build relationships and to learn at the same time. Just kind of wanted you guys to give some comments on what you see over the years. We're a low bid industry. I wouldn't consider us a big happy Friday happy hour type crowd, and that's for good reason. I mean, you're competitors on some jobs, you're teaming together on others, you're quoting, you're bidding prime. What are your thoughts on this? And like I said, I get asked this a lot. How can I get to know that guy, or how can I get in with so and so to show off my product and that sort of thing, Jeff?
Yeah. Getting involved in the associations for me has been one of the best things of my career. I know both of these gentlemen through the WTBA. We've known each other for a long time. So when Eric's mad at me because I'm not getting the curb and gutter on time in his project, I can buy him a beer at the convention and kind of calm him down a little bit, right? But you build relationships, and honestly, the best relationships I have in this industry are from those things. I know, Tim, you've got your group, and a lot of people are involved with your group, and not only are you going to build relationships, but you kind of get a stand-up routine anytime Tim comes up and speaks, right? So there's extra benefits there. So, but it really does matter, and you'd be shocked at how much people are willing to share about how they do things and what they do and things that work and don't work if you get involved and if you're there for part of that participation. So I would encourage anybody to do that at any stage in their career. Actually, the earlier the better.
I would say relationships. It's one of our core values, and you have to think you have internal and external relationships. And one of the relationships, honestly, that as a young project manager, I didn't really truly understand was our relationship with the DOT as a customer. And, now I totally get it and understand it and foster that up and down the line in our group. But understand who your customers are, that they aren't just somebody you've contracted with, somebody that you stand out on the job and fight with. It's somebody you need to have a relationship with.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in a high tide raises all boats, and while might be a competitor with someone someday, the network and the ability, at the end of the day, work is work. We all have a life, a family, something to go home to, and I think there's more power in, even if there's a competitor in one job or a partner in the next, there's value in talking and sharing problems. And I think in this industry, at least when I started, I feel like even in the past 10 years, it's changed as everyone was always so guarded. And it feels like with networking and with other other events, and we've kind of grown out of our shell a little bit in constructions, kind of, especially on the horizontal side of it compared to vertical, with integration of technology and a lot of other things. I think we're becoming a little more open and willing to share with each other and share ideas, and it seems like collaboration has become a lot better, and I'm hoping it continues to trend that way. With if anything good came out of the pandemic, if anything came out good. Pandemic, it was the advent or the support of like virtual meetings, and just you can get more places, see more people, It also made you realize you like face-to-face way more than just virtual meetings and all that. But the power to talk and communicate is become so vital. And I joke, I was just at an annual convention, and 13 years ago when I first started joining WTBA stuff, I could have picked out maybe one or two people in the room, and I got to the point now where my wife's yanking me by the arm to get me out of there because I can't go 5 feet without running into someone I know. So my suggestion is start with one person and grow from there, because some of the best professional relationships I've developed has been from networking and talking to good people, and you'd be amazed what you learn both professional and on a personal level.
All right, thanks, guys. Anyone from the audience here have any questions for the panel or additional comments? Tim?
I'm mostly a subcontractor, so I'm really anxious to hear what these guys say, because I need an answer to that as well.
I wouldn't do anything if I didn't have it in writing. So if prime contractor wants you to do it, they're going to sign what they're going to write something up. If they don't get it from the engineer, it's their bag. But I wouldn't do it if I didn't have it in writing.
Yeah, Neil's 100% correct. The second you put a shovel in the ground or you do the work, you've lost all leverage in the communication aspect or getting paid on it. I mean, are you going to get paid? Good chance, yes. But the second you do the work, you lose leverage on the exact language, and then it turns into he said, she said, or he said, he said. You need to document it and get in writing and make sure everyone's 100% clear on the scope and the payment mechanism. Now, the caveat to that would be, another 15 feet and it's a unit price. Well, that can probably be handled at a different level. The important part then would be making sure that makes it into the immediate comp mod to get paid. But if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist.
That's a good point. And it's communication. Once again, most prime contractors and that relationship between prime and sub are very good about helping the sub facilitate discussions and things like that moving forward. But at the same, even with that being said, still need to take that initiative to make sure that they do the proper written response, or those type of issues tend to get lost in the shuffle. And the later you go, the less chance there is that you're going to recover. Anyone else?
So Neil touched base on the payment aspect and we're going to talk about it again. So I think Neil's example was more first-tier sub, but I think for everybody, most of the people in this room, I think it would be good for them to know the expectation on payment would be if you're a second or third.
Question was about payment for a second or third tier subcontractor.
Nice. I don't know if there's an exact rule after the 10 days, so I'll let it back to Matt, and he's going to give you the general view of it.
Yeah, I mean, ASP4 is extended down to first tier NDBs, NDB suppliers. So I mean, in general, there's a expectation that it'll be 10 days plus 10 days plus 10 days, right? And I don't know if anyone in the room wants to comment on or has issue with that, but that's typically the expectation. But when it gets down to a lower level, it does not necessarily get. Teresa, do you have any comment on this?
Yeah, I would just like to say, if potentially maybe you as a lower tier, maybe don't feel comfortable like going to whoever hired you or the time with it, that you can reach out to the labor compliance person that's on that project, and they can help It's an additional special provision that's in every contract, so that there is guidance on the number of days that the prime has to pay the prime gets the payment from WSDOT. The prime makes payments to the first tiers, and then kind of like that was talking, there is a time frame that those payments need to be dispersed on,
So these guys have talked about accountability and documenting a little bit. Control your own fate on that one, right? Make sure when you do the work, you send an invoice and you have a document of when the work was done and when the invoice was sent. Kind of the bigger the company, the more that it's a process in the office there's a process for making payments, right? And if your invoice doesn't get into the process, there's nobody's going to do it for you, right? So control your own destiny, get your invoice in, follow up on it, and make a contact with the person in payables. And don't just go to your project manager, hey, did you get my invoice? I sent it last week. Where is it in the process? Do you have it in your computer system? Yes, we do. We'll get it here. So, once again, document, control your own destiny with that, and do what you can for yourself. Don't rely on others to do that for you.
Any other questions? I think we still got time, right? Oh, we're getting close. One more for Lori Green. Oh, okay, 2 minutes. I thought you had a question, Lori. You surprised me there.
I'll just hammer a little bit more on the numbers, right? We talked about safety. We talked about a bunch of things. That all costs money, right? And as an employer, you have the responsibility to provide a safe workplace. And that means buying hard hats and safety vests and gloves and ladders. And all that stuff is coming off your bottom line. So make sure as you're doing your bids and as you're doing your financials, those line items are in your bid. If they're not, I'll give you a quick example. I was working with a small concrete contractor. He basically was bidding, he had no idea what he was doing from a numbers standpoint. He had a great system for how he built his projects, but he had a terrible financial system, so he's not getting any feedback. And he's basically bidding his work at, I'll say, break even, doing about $1 million a year. Well, he's giving people a 5% break to pay early or pay ahead of time. So now he's losing 50 grand a year, 5% off $1 million, because he doesn't know he's giving away all his profit. Then if you're in an LLC, you can't take a wage. You have to take draws off your balance sheet, which doesn't show up on your income statement. So he's taking $50,000 off his balance sheet every year to pay himself. Well, that's $100,000 a year he's losing, and he has no idea. So 3 years later, 4 years later, he finds himself, this is a true story, $300,000 to $400,000 in debt, and is completely underwater, and is, this is actually happening. I'm hoping we got him turned around in time, but it matters. All those little points matter. If you're spending 0.5% on safety or 1%, it's got to be in the formula. Otherwise, cash is going to go out the door, and by the time somebody tells you what's going on, it's going to be too late.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Well, thanks, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity, and we'll be around if anyone has any further questions, and have a great, safe, and productive year.